Everyone calls me Femi or FF, my initials. And I wear a few interesting hats right now, but my background is in sciences. So I studied biochemistry, and I have a BSc biochemistry. But just like most young people, I probably should have studied the arts, just based on my natural, the things that I gravitate towards. But of course, you have to have a real job, and that led me into science. And I loved it. I still love biochemistry. But after school, I worked in banking. I did a little bit of sales for a couple of years. And then I found my way into marketing communications. So today I consult for a bunch of brands in Nigeria, multinational brands in Nigeria, as a PR and communications advisor. And I lead a company called ID Africa. The company is an interesting one because we don't just do marketing communications in terms of consulting. We're also a media company, and we're also a tech company. So we have this combination of three skill sets or three capabilities that make us really unique in our market, both in Nigeria and if you look at the region in this part of the world. And that's something that we are really now trying to drive as part of our Pan-Africa growth plans. But let me not bore you with all of that. The point is, I get to do a lot every day as my day job, running a company that operates as a communications advisory to big brands like Heineken, Coca Cola, MultiChoice, Honeywell Group, ShopRite, who else? MTN, actually. So those are some of the brands that I work with here, even ViacomCBS up until late last year. And I've been doing this since 2014, since then. So that's my consulting side. Then the organization I work for, ID Africa, we also own a bunch of digital media platforms. So we have one of the biggest entertainment media platforms, or let me say publishing platforms in Nigeria, called the NetNG, Nigerian Entertainment Today. And the platform has been around since 2009, was one of the pioneer digital platforms in this market. And since the NetNG, we've also built and grown a couple more platforms like newsroom.com, like 234star.com, orin.ng. Neck Live is a conference that we also do. We've been running Neck Live since 2013. It's the biggest entertainment conference in Nigeria, period. And we've done that every year consecutively since 2013. The last edition was in April this year, and it was a hybrid event. We mixed or blended virtual video connection with in-studio presentation. It was really very interesting and innovative. And we had to do that, of course, because of COVID and all the restrictions. So that's 1/3 of my business, of my work, of my day-to-day. The third part of my business is pure tech. So within my company, we also have a bunch of engineers, software engineers, product designers, and technical people who help us to build these digital platforms that I've spoken about. And they also consult for some of our clients and build platforms for them, while at the same time creating consumer products. Because we understand that the future of our business is in product ownership. And I'll talk a little bit about that, about ownership of channels, of platforms, as part of what I want to share. So that's my background. I'm also a chartered marketer with the CIM UK. That's my passion. That's what I really do. Beyond communications, beyond media, I also understand brand marketing and marketing communications. I also teach on the side, as part of my little thing I do with the CIM. So that's who I am. I'm passionate about pop culture. I'm passionate about poetry. I'm passionate about writing. I'm passionate about film. So all of the things that make us joyful as artists or enthusiasts of art. I'm really into music. I used to make music, actually. I had a very brief music career, and then I discovered that it wasn't going to pay the bill, so I put that on the side. But through my work, we still get to do a few things in music, work with musicians, embed music in communication, entertainment, and all of that. So that's me in a nutshell. So maybe I should just jump right into this conversation and share a few lessons I've learned in my work that may be useful on your current role within the foundation, or even just outside of it. I see that we're all creatives here. So I think some of the things I'll share will be useful in your work. And thankfully, you all have either African roots, or you live in Africa, or you've lived in Africa, you have family in Africa. We're all Africans anyways. I think who said that once you're Black, you're an African,
no
whether you
where
live
you come from.
yes, you're an African, right?
You're a Black man, you're an African.
Exactly.
On
So
that note, I'm going to
yeah,
turn off my camera so I can be doing other stuff while you continue the conversation. Okay.
All right, great. Thank you. Okay, so cool. So I've told you a little bit about the company I work with, just to provide you with some insight as to where I'm coming from. But I think I'll try and tailor what I want to say to what you guys are doing individually, professionally, as young professionals, and also what you're doing with the foundation. I think it's important for us Africans to take ownership of our stories. Chimamanda is one of my favorite authors, and I'm sure you're familiar with Chimamanda, fantastic. And one of the famous things that she said in the past is talking about the danger of a single story, and the fact that, and you can see she's a champion of telling our stories, authentically African stories. Interestingly, I also work for a couple of brands that are driving that effort in this part of the world. I work for MultiChoice. MultiChoice owns Africa Magic. Africa Magic owns a bunch of channels that promotes African film, African movies, African TV shows. I also work on BB Nigeria right now, Big Brother Nigeria, which is like the biggest reality TV show out of Africa right now. And we work on the back end for PR. And part of how BB Nigeria has become a phenomenon that is kind of, it's almost unbelievable, the numbers that you see in terms of the engagement rates, the reach, and the passion and the advertising budget that comes behind it. All of these just point, and then the success of Nollywood. Think about the success of Nollywood, the success of Nigerian music, success of South African music, the impact and influence of South African film and South African film producers, even on the continent. There was a time in Nigeria where if you wanted to get the best of production, you go to South Africa. Either you bring in South Africans or you go to South Africa to shoot your music videos and all of that. Now, that has changed a bit now, because people in West Africa have actually picked up some of those skills. But I'm just trying to tell you how Africa has helped Africa over the years to tell our story. So with what the African Film and Arts Foundation is doing, where you are now in America and telling those stories from America, from North America to the diaspora, I think that's a very important part of the telling the African story. There's the part where we who are situated within the continent tell the story and push it out to the world. There's also the role for Africans in the diaspora to also create opportunities to tell those stories over there. And it's this collaboration, Africans in Africa, Africans in the diaspora, telling African stories. That's how we can really, really get to where we need to get to. So how do we play our own part in this bigger picture? So this is me sharing the larger vision, which, not one person will solve that problem, but collectively, you doing your own little part, me doing my own little part, we'll get to do this eventually in the long run. And how do we get there? So I itemized a few important things that African content creators, African storytellers, African media platforms or media professionals, the kind of tools that we need to get to that point. And I think these tools also matter to the work that you're doing with the foundation and some of the things you'll be involved in future. Who knows where you find yourself in a couple of months and years and all of that. So the first thing I want to talk about is creative talent. And the good thing is there's no shortage of talent in Africa or amongst Africans. There's no doubt about that. We actually set the trend in culture. If you look at the what's pop culture in America, the so-called urban culture, it's actually Black culture. It's Black Africans, African Americans, Caribbeans, people of African heritage creating hip hop, creating fashion, creating style, creating language, creating trends. We really are the trendsetters. And what the so-called machine, or let me say, what the commercial elements or what the corporations bring to place, they amplify these things and they commercialize them and they make them part of. And we can't be mad at that, because, the only thing we should try and ensure we do is that people get credit for their creativity, that the people who are creating these cultures or these trends or creating this art, they get compensation. You don't want to see the innovators being broke, while the people that commercialize the innovation, they get to enjoy all of the benefits. So, but that's a separate conversation. It's a bit of a political conversation, so I won't get into that. But I think the baseline is talent, and I think we all have the talent. There's something that I love to say, and I hear it a lot amongst them. I think it's a mantra that Andela is an African company founded in Nigeria that trains technologists, trains developers, tech talents, and supplies them to tech companies around the world. And it's valued at almost $1 billion now in terms of its valuation. And it was founded by a couple of Africans and someone from Canada, but mostly Nigerians founded the company. But the point I'm trying to make here is talent is evenly distributed. It's just opportunities that people are deprived of. And the first thing we need to understand in order to tell this African story is to get our talent right. And you can have the talent, but we need to develop that talent. And that's where training comes in. That's why we have to travel sometimes and leave our parents, leave our siblings, leave our homes, and travel around the world to acquire those skills, because maybe we don't have those opportunities back home. And I think that's part of what this internship also offers. Beyond what your natural innate talent is, you want to also get trained. You want to get exposure. I think Sia says she's going to Georgetown, if I'm not mistaken. I think Fred said he's been everywhere, from studying in South Africa, you've lived in Mozambique, you are now in California, you've been around the world. And why are we doing this? Even Moji was born in, well, I think she was born in the UK, but she's been in Nigeria, schooled in Nigeria, lived in the UK, lived in New York, lived in Atlanta. And she's literally been around the world. And why are Africans consistently doing that? One major reason is in search of opportunities. We are always in search of opportunities, a place, platforms, and channels to present our skills to the world so the world can see our creativity. But the first level is creativity. If you can put together a creative team, half of the problem solved. And I don't have any doubt that we have the creative team here. The next thing is consistency. I'll give you a little story. Many of you understand that right now, I think anyone living, anywhere in the world right now, the biggest song of the summer right now is a song called Essence, featuring Wizkid and Thames, right? And that's like the biggest song anywhere right now. And it's a wholly 100% African song. I don't want to say Nigerian song, so it's not like I'm just taking all the Nigerian credit, but let's say it's a 100% Nigerian song, written by Nigerians, produced by Nigerians, and all of that. And that's, you were listening to it 15 minutes ago. Fantastic. I've watched the video countless times. I probably will go back to it after this conversation. But what am I saying about Essence? It's the fact that Wizkid has been on top of this thing, has been doing this since the early 2000s, from when he was a teenager. And his consistency, he had the talent. We in Nigeria knew Wizkid had this talent almost 15 years ago, but he needed to do the grind, the grunt work, learn, travel the world, get partners, improve himself consistently over the years to get to the point where he's not just collaborating with Drake, he's having Justin Bieber, as powerful and as massive as Justin Bieber is, literally, thankfully, or what's the word, gratefully jumping on the song to make a remix. And Justin Bieber didn't just make the remix, he went and shot a quick video for the remix. That's how eager he was to jump on Essence. And that just tells you the power of consistency. So if today you put out a piece of blog post about African Film and Arts Foundation, about the film festival, about the Cinema for Culture, about all the programs, it's not just one piece of content that will do the trick. It's not just one press release that will do the trick. It's consistently putting out materials, one person, one audience per time, one click per time, and you are building that. It's a tough job to do for a media organization. Earlier, I spoke about how NetNG has been around since 2009. That's a long ass time to be maintaining a media platform, especially one that doesn't turn a profit. And I'll get to that later about the challenges we face in the media business, how you can actually be creating content with no returns, with no benefits in the short term. But consistency is critical to success, whether on a personal level or on a corporate level. The next thing I think is cultural relevance. In order to be authentic, so let me just call it authenticity. We should be true to ourselves. There's no need trying to be who you are not. It doesn't ring true. The most authentic side of us gets appreciated by the world. And I think that's one thing that Africans need to keep reminding ourselves of, whether in terms of just your personal or your personality or your persona as a human being, as a professional, as a creative, then the organization as well. The authenticity and the reality of our culture, of our uniqueness should stand out and should show in what we are doing. The next thing will be impact. I think more than commercial benefits, more than traffic, web traffic, more than clicks, more than social media followers, we should also look at impact. I mentioned earlier that the company I work with has a media platform called Newsroom. And with Newsroom, spelled Newsroom, you can go to newsroom.com and just check it out. I'll share some of those links maybe after this chat. We deliberately just avoid chasing breaking news. We deliberately just avoid trying to be the breaker of news. Something's happening, let's jump on it. We ask ourselves, what can we do that will have an impact on the lives of young Nigerians? We feel, and without being disrespectful to younger people, I'm also young myself, I'm in my mid-30s, but I also work with mostly people in their early 20s. Most of my colleagues are 21, 22, 23. And we have an inside joke where we talk about how young people in that generation are not as plugged into the history of our country, the history of our people, and some of these fundamentals that we took pride in when we were in our teens or in our early 20s. And most of that is just because the world is blending together over time. The world is becoming smaller with digital connections, with social media. If people are being depressed over something that happens in Afghanistan, thousands of miles away, a Nigerian in Lagos can actually acquire that depression just based off of feeding off of the media. This didn't happen when I was in secondary school. This didn't happen when I was in my early 20s. You didn't have that much connection to the rest of the world. You had to go on TV, on cable TV, or send an email to connect with a friend across the oceans. Right now, you can be having private conversations with people who are millions of, well, maybe not millions, thousands of miles away from you. And it feels sometimes that you share their burden, you imbibe their pain. And this happened a lot during the pandemic. I noticed some of my staff actually having challenges with their mental health, not because Nigeria had a huge, in fact, Nigeria was mostly safe or mostly spared the real big troubles of COVID. We didn't really have too many issues or cases of COVID-19 in Africa. Most countries in Africa actually had it good compared to places like Italy, places like even the US. It was really tough, right? All the numbers of death and sick and illnesses and the hospitals and all of that. We didn't really have that in this part of the world. But I saw that a lot of my team members were showing traits of depression or tendencies to be depressed, to be overwhelmed. People were lethargic. It was a tough time, and we had to actually give room for people to speak with therapists and have time off work. We created an unlimited leave day policy in 2020 just because of that. Now, why am I talking about all of this? I'm saying that we should look for stories and opportunities to tell stories that have impact on the lives of people beyond just chasing traffic and beyond all the other benefits. this is very critical. I think in the long run, the people that create impact in culture will have the longer term benefits, even if in the short run, it looks as if you are just beating against a stone and you are not getting results. If you are trying to create impactful storytelling, impactful content, impactful projects, I think in the long run, the world will give you credit for that. It's a very interesting way. You'll get those benefits in the long run. So that's my personal mantra. And that's what we try to do with our media platforms. There was a little crisis in a small town in southwest Nigeria a few months back, some tribal issues. And one of my reporters went there and tried to dig into the roots of that crisis beyond what was reported in the media. And he discovered that the actual person that was killed, that sparked the riots that led to death, was actually a cobbler, and that his story was such a heartbreaking story. We discovered that he left behind 4 kids, a widow that didn't have a job, and his kids lived in a tiny room somewhere on the back end of the city. And when he reported that story and actually broke the news of how the crisis started, which nobody had reported before, we got a lot of feedback from the readers saying, hey, how can we help this family? And then we thought, hey, why not just do a donation, create a donation portal for the woman to raise some funds. And at the end of the day, we raised 500,000 naira, which is not a lot of money, but which is a lot of money within this context. And for me, that kind of story pays for all the stories we've done throughout the year. We can point at a family, a woman, a widow with 4 kids, who has now started a business off of the donations that the media platform raised. For me, that was just so satisfying that we could do that off the back of just storytelling. And that is kind of impact that I think we should strive for. Look for opportunities like that to tell stories that are not being told. If you are displaying or showcasing films of African origin, maybe we don't want to chase all of the films that already have the big Netflix budgets, the big studio budgets. What are the stories, independent stories that are being told by independent filmmakers, but high quality films that are being told, but don't get the same kind of spotlight? We may just decide to impact on that sector of the industry and choose to tell those stories. In fact, the fact that we are telling African stories in the first place is impactful. So let's even just say that's great work. But then we can take it to the next level and the next level and all of that. The next thing would be to invest in owned assets. I think as a PR person, one thing we've done very well in my line of work with my organization is we've built and we've invested over the years in our own assets. And when I say own assets, I mean we own our own media properties. We've built up our channels, our blogs, our websites. Our social media following at ID Africa alone is over 1.3 million in terms of social media following for our Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and all the platforms that we own. So meaning that if we need to reach people, instead of having to pay for media, instead of having to buy advertising, we can use our channels to propagate our message. And it took years of investment, of creating content, of consistency, of creativity, and all these other things I've said to build that kind of following, that kind of trust. It's really a major, massive property that we've built for ourselves. Now, I think everybody can do that. African Film and Arts Foundation can do that. If you work for any organization in future, you can do that. Even for yourselves as individuals, you can build your own media property to such a point where if you need to talk to the world, you can speak to them without having to struggle. I think Elon Musk has done that for Tesla, for SpaceX, and all these other businesses, even as a tech entrepreneur. And that's why I can brag about not investing so much in advertising. I'm sure at some point in his journey, they will invest in advertising. But for now, Elon has used his own personal channels to drive promotions, to drive communication, and to impact his audience. That's a very critical tool that every media organization must pay attention to. Then the next one is a no-brainer, digital technology, social media. I don't need to say too much about that. We have a lot of control, but the only thing I'll say about social media and digital channels is to put more investment in our own assets than these shared assets. For example, Instagram can wake up tomorrow and shut down your page. So what do? Twitter can wake up tomorrow and say you flouted some rules or you violated some policies and shut you down. But nobody can shut your website down just like that, you know. So I'll say, as we are building all these social media channels, we also invest a lot in the owned assets, the assets that we own, our websites, our blogs. So as you post on social, don't forget to also create content for those channels as well. Then the final thing I would say is, in terms of content creation, there are a few tips that I want to share on how you can create content without stretching yourself too thin. This is a relatively small team, and you want to make the most of the resources that you have. This works for African Film and Arts Foundation. This will work for whichever organization you find yourself in future. Not all of us will work for Google and Facebook that have big budgets to staff a team. So most times you may be working on a team and you're trying to just make things work with little resources, right? So the best way that I encourage my team to do this is, we create one piece of content in terms of the idea. We put a lot of effort into coming up with the right idea, create one piece of content, but ensure that that single piece of content exists in diverse formats. So if Sia writes what we call a listicle, which is a list like those BuzzFeed lists, short, punchy blog posts in list format, that listicle can exist in at least 3, 4, 5 formats. And I'll just run through them. So you have the listicle on your blog in text format. You turn that listicle into a series of slideshows for Instagram. We'll call them slidegrams. You know, you have a cover, each point in the listicle is a slidegram. You have that. That same listicle can become a Twitter thread where you have each point as a tweet and as part of a thread. That same listicle can turn into a short video. So the same slidegram can become a video that flows one into another. So, and those are just 4 quick formats from the top of my head that you can do with a single listicle. In fact, the listicle may not be the original material. It may be a regular press release that's the original material. So a press release, you cut it down into a listicle, you convert that into a slidegram. You can use a tool like Canva. You don't even have to be a designer to create a slidegram. And then the same listicle, you push it onto Twitter and you turn it into a thread, text in thread format. And the same listicle, you can turn it into a video. And there are all kinds of tools that you can use to create videos, clean and nice videos, even if you can't work with all the professional Adobe tools and all of that. You can work with a simple mobile app and convert your listicle into a video. So you can imagine how much you can do with one single idea. And that mentality is what I try to preach to my team all of the time, because we're also a very relatively small team, considering the volume of work and the volume of channels that we have to manage and the number of clients that we also have to support. So it's part of the creativity I talked about earlier, this approach of thinking one single idea in 100 different formats. And it's almost like magic. It works like magic. Once you can figure it out, and you have your templates, you are just replicating. It helps you to keep the consistency going, you know, because it's difficult to create new content every day and night and day after day. It's really tough. So you come up with one single content, you multiply the formats in which the content can exist, so it stays fresh. And then what you are posting on Facebook looks slightly different from what's on Instagram, looks slightly different from what's on Twitter, but it's the same message, the same core content, and you keep that going. So for me, I think these are some of the quick tips I would say I'd like to share in terms of how to, whether you are running a media team, whether you are a media professional and all of that. Then finally, I would say for activations, now you're working towards an event or a couple of events. We have a few frameworks that we use in my office for planning towards events in terms of the storytelling. And it's nothing too dramatic or too new or that you've never seen before. We start everything with a build-up, obviously, where you say stories or angles or content like guess who's coming to so-so person and so-so person to perform at so-so person to launch blah, blah, blah. will you be at da da da? Here's what to expect at blah blah blah. Those kinds of preparatory, it's coming kind of storytelling. Then when you get to the event day, on D-Day, we do a lot of as it happens, live blogging, live tweeting, live storytelling, happening now at blah, blah, blah. First photos from so and so, red carpet, live, watch this as it happens. We do a lot of live storytelling, live social, live blogging. Then the morning after is also very critical. After the day, the morning after, that's when we send out our press releases to the media, or the night before, depending on what kind of day it is. You want to send your press releases to the media. You want to do a recap and say, oh, in case you missed it, all the stars that graced so events, so person shut down such and such events, about last night, what you missed last night. And then we keep that going in the next couple of days, maybe 1 to 5 days after the events or after the festival or after the activation. Then after that, those first couple of days post-event, we then start doing what I like to call the evergreen content. These are a bit more deep dives, features, recaps, where you talk about why so and so, why the African Film and Art Foundation is doing so and so project, why we are investing in so and so sector, why we must tell authentic African stories, why Africans in the diaspora should support Africans back home to develop blah, 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 So we then do all this agenda setting, high level, deep thinking, thought pieces, articles, and communication around what we are doing and why we are doing it. So if you think of yourself planning an event and you break your storytelling into these 4 parts, the build up, as it happens, in case you missed it, and the evergreen content. This formula is simple. It's almost like, yeah, I know that's not new, but it helps to keep track of these frameworks because they help you tell a great story when you are preparing towards an event. I know some of your events are practically around the corner and there may not be so much time to do all of this, but in future, I think you can implement some of these frameworks and apply them in telling stories around your projects and activations. We can have this conversation for hours and there's so much to talk about. I'm sure if you guys have questions, maybe that will allow me to dwell on a few things, but I have a meeting at 6, so I'm hoping that we can use the next 15 minutes to just have questions and any other thing I must have missed out. So that's about it. That's all I think I want to share at this moment. Happy to take your questions or if there's any other contribution. Thank you.
That was actually a master class, Femi. That was
speed
I
talking.
learned so much.
Yeah.
All these things,
Thank you.
Implementing them this weekend. It's possible to be done because we kind of work like that. But I think documenting it the way you've explained that framework, I'm using that framework. Because it makes sense.
Yeah.
It makes sense. Yeah. So I had some things I wanted to point out. Let me start from the bottom. So can you name some tools? Because clearly you're talking about using tools that enable a collaborative work. So can you name some tools that you use for maybe your events, when you're hosting events, when you're designing things?
Yeah. So for our work, because most of our email system is built on G Suite, so we do a lot of collaboration with G Suite, Google Docs. We do a lot of that, Google Slides. Our designers use collaborative tools like Figma and the rest. Some of our social media team use Canva a lot, partly because for non-designers, Canva has made your life easy. It's a quick turnaround, and the designers create templates because you need a designer to create the initial templates. They create the templates, they share the frameworks with us, we import them into Canva, and then we share and collaborate from there. There are other tools, for example, for link sharing, we use, I've forgotten what that's called now. Yeah, we use Deliver It for our web to social link sharing. So for example, when you publish on, what I'll do is maybe I'll compile these things and then just share them in a document or in a simple email to Moji so she can share with the team. I may not be able to think of a lot more off the top of my head, but I love the ones I used to use when I was still very much involved in the day-to-day. The liver it used was quite useful. So we publish an article on the blog, and then it goes on Twitter, Facebook automatically. I think they have Instagram now, actually. I think so. But we use that for auto sharing and all of that. What other tools? But collaboration, most, in fact, you'll be surprised how much is available on Google. It's quite interesting, you know, some of which are free even, that you can use. Something as simple as Google Docs is amazing for writers, for planning. Yeah, great. For planning, calendars, social calendars, and all of that. I have a few social media planning tools that I can also share. Then content calendars. I don't know if you have frameworks that you already use, but I have a bunch of templates, content calendars, templates that you can use for your social content calendars that you can explore from HubSpot and a couple of other platforms that you can also explore. We use WhatsApp a lot in Nigeria.
Yeah,
WhatsApp is quite.
We use that too.
Yeah, WhatsApp is very helpful. I have a couple of colleagues that use Slack. I'm not a big fan of Slack, maybe because, yeah, Slack is, especially for tech teams, my tech guys love Slack a lot.
I love Slack.
Yeah.
It's transparent.
Slack, yeah. You can see what's going on.
Everything. So I keep telling everybody, you can see everything that's going on.
Yeah, yeah. So that's also there. What else? So what I'll do is, because I may be missing out a few very useful, important ones. I'll share them maybe in a later email. I'm sharing a bunch of links on the group chat, on the Zoom chat, just to see some of our work, so you can appreciate some of the stuff I'm talking about. NEC.ng is the conference website. IDFK is the parent company, and Newsroom is one of our media platforms. The NetNG is a media platform. 234 Star is a media platform. If you check out the social pages of all these platforms, you see some of the things we put out tailored to the Nigerian audience. So yeah, there are a few ideas you may also kind of pick up from there that can be applied to some of the work that you do.
Yeah, I think I was featured on the
NetNG? Yeah, we did a feature then. That's true.
I'm just copying all these links. So the other question I had, okay, so one of the things I wanted to point out was, I can't copy this. Fred, can you do me a favor, please? Did you copy the links?
Okay, I'll just share them in case. I'll share them with you, ma'am. Maybe after the call, I'll just pull them together in one email along with the tools.
Okay.
So that should be helpful. Yeah.
So I just wanted to point out that our film festival, we actually do focus on independent films. And that's what a lot of film festivals actually focus on. Yes, we may show like a commercial film. That's because, we're trying to get that audience as well. But typically film festivals, that's what we show. We focus on independent films. So we get, a lot of very interesting and different kinds of stories. I wanted to point that out.
Okay, that's good.
The question I had was, so when you build your websites, do you use templates or do you build them from scratch?
Yeah, so we started out mostly using WordPress templates. They are easy to use. They made our lives easy. And back then, we didn't really have hardcore software engineers. So we worked with WordPress. Templates are quite easy, and then we customize them over time. But since last year, we've actually started hiring real serious experienced software engineers. So some of the products we are building for consumers are now built from scratch. But for our media assets, all these assets I shared with you, they are WordPress sites. All of them are templates, but we've customized them greatly and made a lot of modifications.
Okay. Okay, I think, and then the last thing I wanted to point out was, you were talking about, us focusing on impactful stories. And I think I'd shared with Sia already. I'm not sure if I shared it with Fred. Because there's just too much information everywhere. The story idea that you suggested to me, Femi, we think we can go with it, because Femi pointed out the fact that what we're doing at the foundation with the internship and having these interns from all over the world is actually a story. So we are going to work on that. Did I mention that to you, Fred? Yeah, so I mentioned it to Sia as well. So we're gonna be on that. So Femi, we would like you to guide us with that. So I'll probably put Sia in touch with you. Maybe just WhatsApp, or maybe you can join us on Slack. I could invite you to Slack, whichever is easier for you. Oh, you said you don't like Slack, so WhatsApp will work.
Yeah, most of my activities are inside WhatsApp, so that's easy. Yeah. WhatsApp is fine.
I'll make introduction. We have a room anyway, so I'll just reopen that room and put everybody in there. So maybe you can guide us, because I think it would be an enjoyable, for me anyway. I don't know about everybody else. It would be just, because when you're the worker, because I'm a worker, and I always tell people, all this being in front, me, I'm the behind the scenes person. So as a worker, you don't appreciate the impact of what you're doing. Yeah. So it's like, this is going to make me appreciate that, this is what you're actually doing. Actually writing out an experience of something you've done recently. Yeah.
So you take a step back and then look at what you're doing and say, oh, wow, this is what we're doing. And it applies to the individuals involved in the project as well. You can just be going day by day, just grinding it out. But then you don't step back to say, hey, we actually just created, So what we did with my team, and we'll get the time to actually dive deeper later. But what we did with my team was I put one of our copywriters to take charge of this. She created a simple Google form with a couple of leading, interesting questions. And everyone on the team who has worked on a project or an assignment or a task in recent times get to submit their responses to these forms. And in the responses that they've submitted, a story is being built. And so their responses form the actual story. So it's almost like a conversation with the company or a conversation with an interviewer. So it's almost like a Q&A, but the Q&A is not written in the traditional boring Q&A format. It's almost like your responses end up becoming a story. And then it's almost like a spotlight for you to get the shine for your labor of love or whatever it is that you've done for the company. So, and it's quite exciting. The first episode should be out in a few days. So I'm even looking forward to it. So we created a template for the banner, did all of that and all. So yeah, I think that's an example of how to make it easy, because maybe not everybody is a writer. And so asking people to write their experiences may be tough, but asking them to respond to a survey, kind of just simplifies the process. And then the copywriter can then tie this together and, there you have your story. And just like I said, we are going to publish it in form of a long form blog post. We're going to do a slidegram. We're going to turn it into a Twitter thread. We're going to
share that with us, please.
Yeah.
Once it's out.
Yeah.
So if you can
Sorry?
make notes.
Yeah, once it's out. Okay, yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah.
I'll do that.
Please. Okay, all right. Any questions? Sia, Fred, before we hop off?
I just feel, thank you, first of all. That was great. I was here typing notes the whole time from the beginning till the end, because I've also been interested in starting a media company. I have a couple colleagues. We have a art collective, we call it, which we hope to eventually build into a media company. And so this was all just interesting because it was all these thoughts that were straggling that you kind of brought together. And my questions are like big, like, how do you manage a whole media company? What's the business model like?
Yeah.
So yeah, I wish, save those.
Yeah, I wish I could go deeper into that, but let me just summarize. I told you we have it's almost like we have three companies in one. So we have this consulting business where we serve big brands and we provide marketing and communication services to them. That's like the cash cow. That's where the real money is made. Right? So whatever we are getting from there is how we then invest in the media business, which is not very profitable, but we make it work by leveraging the skill sets, the capacity, and the understanding of storytelling, the understanding of the audience. We use all of those things to support the brand work we do. So some of the clients come to us just based off the back of our content production capabilities, our understanding of the audience. So the media business for us is almost like a laboratory where we get to experiment, we get to understand the audience behavior, content that works, content that doesn't work, and we get to also sharpen our storytelling skills. So in a way, we've not really solved the problem of revenue for the media industry, but we found a way that helps us to continue running a media business, whether or not it's profitable. It's profitable in the big picture for us as an organization, but standalone, it may not be that profitable. What we're experimenting with next, and we are currently building out those features and the technology around it, is subscription. That has worked for the New York Times, it's worked for the Washington Post, it's worked for even some of these, what do you call it now? A lot of newsletter guys. What's the name of that newsletter platform?
Like MailChimp.
Yeah, MailChimp, not MailChimp now, the ones that a lot of journalists are using, independent writers.
Medium?
Not Medium. It's like the only fans of journalism. What's it called? I'll remember later. It's a subscription-based newsletter platform for freelance journalists, and you sign up, you pay a token, and then you read their exclusive newsletters every day. I'll remember later.
I know the one you're talking about. I think it starts with
F. Starts with what?
F.
Yeah, actually. I'll get it. Maybe my head is scrambled right now.
Yeah, I subscribe to it.
Yeah. Yeah, but to answer your question, Fred, we've just found a way to balance the commercial side with what we are doing for brands. And that's how we kind of pay for the media operations. But media is struggling right now. We are hoping that somebody will crack the problem and figure out a way to make media profitable. And I understand that that's part of why a lot of media entrepreneurs are discouraged from investing so much, because you really can't figure out how to make money. Before we used to make a lot of money from AdSense, from advertising, but that's dried up now. Google is no longer paying as much as they used to. There's a lot of free content out there that people are not willing to pay for. So it's tough. It's a tough time for the man. It's global. It's a global problem. So hopefully somebody figures it out.
Okay. Any other questions before we go?
I don't have a question per se, but more like a comment. I really liked how you broke down like social media and like how you interact with like how you stay consistent and to gradually like increase your audience and like have more impact, and how you broke it down to the build up, what is happening at the moment, stories, and what did you call the last part? The evergreen, part, the evergreen content. I really, really like that. And I think that could be something that we could implement, possibly think about how it can translate in the foundation, and how, like you said, we gradually want to increase impact in the audience we already have, and then expand both impact and the audience. And yeah, I found that to be very, very meaningful and helpful. So thank you very much. And a lot of the things that you're speaking about from a PR point of view, from a media point of view, was very relevant to the work that I do for the organization. So like Fred, I took a lot of notes, and yeah, I'm really excited to see like to implement all that you've spoken about today.
Fantastic. I just shared a screenshot of the framework, just to remind. So that's something that's useful. All right, thanks.